The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com, here on the radio row of the Exhibit Center, Exhibit Hall at CPAC. And joining the show now is yet another Republican candidate for the United States Senate, Richard Murdoch, who is involved in a primary with incumbent Republican Senator Dick Lugar from Indiana. I know Dick Lugar has been around. How many years has he been in Senate?
He's been in the United States Senate since 1977, 36 years.
36, that's a long time not to have a real job.
Well, in Indiana, we like to make the point that when he began his run for the U.S. Senate, Peyton Manning was but a gleam in Archie's eye, so it's been a long time.
And of course, when he was elected, the United States was still the world's largest creditor nation. We had a huge trade surplus. The fundamentals were still sound. They were beginning to deteriorate, but we still had a very sound economy. So he played an integral role in destroying our economy.
Exactly. This is a historic moment. Just in the last 6 months, we've had our credit rating downgraded for the first time ever. We've seen a 10-year yield on the Treasury bill at 1.7%, the lowest rate in all of American history. And we now see for the first time in peacetime, our national debt is equal to the gross domestic product.
Yeah, and of course, the gross domestic product is overly inflated by statisticians using hedonics, and it's all fluff anyway. It's all consumption. So if you look at our debt as a percentage of manufacturing, for example, I mean, it is off the charts. Plus, if you look at what were the other statistics you threw out? I don't know where the...
Well, I mentioned the GDP, the interest rates.
Yeah, interest rates, even though interest rates are a nominal low, if you adjust for inflation, they're even lower.
Exactly.
Because the rate of inflation is higher than what the government admits, but even if you take their own CPI, these are the highest negative rates we've ever had. And yes, S&P lowered our credit rating, but the truth is they didn't lower it far enough. We're junk.
Yeah, and it's so ironic because everyone, when the credit rating was lowered, we all agreed, I certainly said, this was going to cause the cost of government borrowing to go up. But in fact, it's gone down, and that's in large part just because of the way the manipulation's taken place.
Well, that's because the Fed is acting as the enabler, and not just the U.S. central bank, but he's getting cooperation from foreign central banks. Everybody is buying up dollars in U.S. treasuries, and that is sparing us of the consequence of our profligacy. But it's lulling us into a false sense of security instead of the market disciplining the government and forcing spending cuts because rates are rising. Rates are being held artificially low, so we borrow even more, and all we're doing is setting ourselves up for a massive disaster that's much worse than 2008. And when it happens, everyone's going to say, nobody could have seen it coming, and of course, it was obvious.
You're exactly right. And I know this is radio. It's hard to use a visual aid, but I carry this in my pocket.
Yeah, you've got a Zimbabwe $100 trillion bill, which very well one day might say the United States on it. We can have a picture of Ben Bernanke on there instead of George Washington or Ben Franklin. It was and it could be one of our $1 trillion bills.
Exactly. This $100 trillion note of Zimbabwe is worth about $5.60. The official currency in Zimbabwe now is the U.S. dollar.
It's probably only worth $5 as a collector's item. Exactly. I don't know if anybody would actually give you anything for it. But here's an interesting statistic. I forget the exact date, but when Dick Lugar was first elected to the U.S. Senate, the Zimbabwe dollar and the U.S. dollar were at parity. Mm-hmm. So if you had a 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar bill in your hand when Dick Lugar was elected president, you would have been the richest man in the world, and it wouldn't even be close. 100 trillion U.S. dollars. Imagine destroying. I mean, this probably was the equivalent of all the purchasing power in the entire world that I'm holding in my hand. Destroyed. Yeah. Destroyed by a printing press. We've got the same press, same technology.
Yeah. This is what happens when you try to spend your way to prosperity and you destroy your credit rating on the way, and it's a dangerous thing we are doing. And if they're using the U.S. dollar today after destroying theirs, it begs the question, whose currency will we use if we destroy our own?
Well, gold. We'll probably use nobody's. And, that's why, I don't know if Indiana is one of the states that's trying to look into starting to coin money now, like the Constitution says, gold and silver. The federal government's not doing it. Maybe the states will.
The legislature has had that up. I don't know that it came out of committee, but they were talking about whether or not the treasurer of Indiana could accept gold as currency and accept gold for payment, which right now I'm not allowed to do. But
yeah, because we know, the U.S. Constitution says that states can only make gold and silver legal tender, and there is no gold and silver. The federal government's supposed to coin money, which is gold and silver, because if they coin anything else, it's not legal tender.
Right.
And they're not doing that. All they're doing now is running this script off of a printing press, and it's the same technology, it's the same thing they're doing in Zimbabwe. It is unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional for a reason. The founding fathers lived through the Continental, and that's where the expression "not worth a continental." Pretty soon, it's going to be not worth a Federal Reserve note.